Mr Castleton.
Your Honour, I appear with my learned friend Mr Harker in relation to a number of matters which Your Honour will receive closing submissions in. Can I indicate the proposed order of hearing this morning? I propose to address you firstly in relation to the Long Gully Road fire at Drake, followed by the inquests into the deaths of Robert Lindsey and Gwendolyn Hyde. Next, I'll address Your Honour in relation to the Werry fire, Adaminity complex fire, finally the Water Rockton fire. If I could commence, Your Honour, with the inquiry into the Long Gully Road Drake fire. Your Honour, these are the closing submissions for the inquiry into Long Gully Road Drake fire under Section 81, subsection 2 of the Coroners Act. Your Honour's task in this hearing is to record, if possible, findings on the following matters: the date and place of the fire and the circumstances of the fire. The Long Gully fire was first reported to authorities on 5 September 2019. It was declared out on 27 October 2019, therefore burning for approximately 53 days. It impacted an area of approximately 74,000 hectares, 45,000 hectares of which was private land, and 29,000 hectares of which was state forest and national park. 45 homes and 54 other structures were destroyed or damaged, and the fire impacted the communities of Drake, Kaplan, Bulldog and Rocky River in the Tennyson Shire local government area, Newingar, Mukamar and Waibra, Keebarban and Coombar in the Clarence Valley local government area in the lands of the Kilroy and Bundjalung peoples. Tragically, on the 8th of October 2019, the fire made a 25-kilometre eastward run, during which it impacted upon the property of Gwendolyn Hyde and Robert Lindsey in Coombar, resulting in their deaths. This inquest into the deaths of Gwendolyn Hyde and Robert Lindsey was held separately to the inquiry of the cause and origin of the fire. Closing submissions for those inquests will be made shortly, Your Honour. Your Honour has received evidence, a volume comprising 443 pages, which includes statements from members of New South Wales Police and RFS, fire investigation reports and statements, RFS documents, lightning strike data, Bureau of Meteorological Weather data, and several witness statements from those who observed the fire in its infancy. Your Honour also has the benefit of an expert report from Jeff Conway, who reviewed the fire investigation reports of New South Wales Police Fire Investigator Senior Constable Robert Farrer and New South Wales RFS Fire Investigator Stephen May. This fire was one of very many fires across the state of New South Wales in the 2019-2020 bushfire season. Not all fires were reported to Your Honour. Not all fires reported to Your Honour proceeded to a coronial inquiry into cause and origin. Not all fires that proceeded to a coronial inquiry into the cause and origin will continue to further consideration via a general inquiry as part of Stage 2 of Your Honour's proceedings. It is submitted that it is not necessary for the Long Gully Road fire to proceed to further investigation via a general inquiry. Coming, if I may now, to how the fire started. The following chronology for the Long Gully Road fire is drawn from witness statements and other material from within the brief of evidence. It doesn't purport to be an exhaustive account. Everyone who survived the fire has their own tale to tell. Further, given that the inquiry is limited to the cause and origin of the fire, the chronology will focus upon such matters with a brief recitation of fire progress until it was declared out. As at September 2019, Simon Kaplan lived on a 2-acre property at 681B McLeod's Creek Road, Sandy Hill, which is surrounded by McLeod's Creek Station. He returned to the property from Queensland between 6 and 7 p.m. on the 3rd of September 2019, right on dark. At that time, he did not notice any smoke at the property or anything to alert him to the possibility that the fire was close. Similarly, the next day, Mr. Kaplan did not notice any smoke. He went to a neighbour's house during the day, returning home at about 8 p.m. The following day, the 5th of September 2019, Mr. Kaplan awoke at about 7 a.m. He then noticed a fire had burned from the southwest and across the south of his property, right up to his house sometime overnight. The likely point of origin of the fire relative to Mr. Kaplan's property is shown on this map, Your Honour. Mr. Kaplan's property apparently wasn't at further risk, and so he went to a neighbour's that day to help with his roof. When he returned to his property at the end of his work, he had to drive through fire to get to his house. Mr. Kaplan did not report the fire at this stage because he thought the RFS would have already been alerted to it. Indeed, on the 5th of September between 12:10 p.m. and 2:14 p.m, 5 community members located in or near Drake and Tenterfield separately called 000 to report a fire burning southwest of the village of Drake, which is on the Bruxner Highway in northern New South Wales, 44 kilometres east of Tenterfield, within the Tenterfield Shire local government area. RFS crews from Fraser's Cutting in Tabulam and Drake were dispatched to fight the fire. The Fraser's Cutting crew was unable to make it through the smoke to access the fire. The Drake crew reached the fire using the Goffs fire truck shortly after 3 p.m. They observed a fire with a 1 to 2 kilometre front burning in all directions with a flame height of 1 to 2 metres. The fire was burning in a location southwest of Drake and west of Long Gully Road. I'll just have displayed now, you're on a line scan of the fire taken on the 5th of September 2019. The fire was identified as burning on private property, McLeod Creek Station in Sandy Hill. Your Honour will recall this was the station that surrounded the property where Simon Kaplan was living. At this point, the fire was located burning south of McLeod's Creek, south of the Garrard State Forest and north of the Timbara National Park. The next day, 6 September 2019, a number of retardant drops were made. Around 4 p.m, the fire spotted in several locations between Rocky River Road and Long Gully Road, crossing eastward of Long Gully Road. Helicopters reported the fire jumping a dozer trail as well as spotting 10 kilometres ahead of the fire front. I'll just have displayed now, you're on an aerial image which was taken by the RFS, which shows the scale of the Long Gully fire on the 6th of September 2019. The Drake Rural Fire Service Brigade organised a door knock of properties on Long Gully Road, advising some landowners of the threat from the approaching fire and an emergency alert issued. But not everyone was alerted, and numerous witnesses have reported the shock at the speed and ferocity of the fire, a fire which may well have started in August. The fire spread 18 kilometres on the 6th of September 2019, which is depicted in this fire progression map. And it spread a further 19 kilometres southeast on 7 September 2019. There were reports of spot fires 10 kilometres in advance of the fire front and of the fire initialising 3 separate head fires. On 10 September 2019, the fire impacted the Bruxner Highway east of Drake and damaged or destroyed 8 houses and 22 outbuildings. Further properties in Drake were impacted on the 16th of September 2019. As earlier noted, on 8 October 2019, things deteriorated again and the fire made a significant eastward run of 25 kilometres, tragically resulting in the deaths of Gwendolyn Hyde and Robert Lindsey. after having also destroyed properties in Uingar. I'll just have played now, Your Honour, a video taken by Christopher Warrington, a resident of Uingar. That was taken on the 8th of October 2019. The following day, Your Honour, Mr. Warrington took a further video of the destruction caused by the fire. I'll just have that played as well. I'll just have displayed now, Your Honour, a fire progression map for the 9th of October 2019. On the 9th of October 2019, the fire merged with the previously burnt western section of the Busby Flat Fire, which was the subject of a separate cause and origin inquiry by Your Honour. Towards mid-October 2019, fire activity reduced with significant rain at Uingar recorded on the 12th of October. This both helped to suppress the fire in some parts, but also frustrated firefighting efforts in other parts where appliances were prevented from using certain tracks or trails because of mud. As I said earlier, the fire was eventually declared out on 27 October 2019. Coming from A now to the cause and origin investigation. On 11 September 2019, a cause and origin scene investigation was undertaken by Fire Investigator Stephen May from the RFS and Senior Constable Robert Farragher of the New South Wales Police. They were also accompanied by Detective Rod Fenner from Inverell Detectives. Mr May had attended the Northern Tablelands Fire Control Centre in Glen Innes the day before, where he was supplied with RFS data, including grid references for the area of interest, situation reports, incident logs, and other documents. Mr May also returned to the scene on 13 October 2019 to take photographs, but vegetation regrowth in between meant this was of less utility. Mr May and Senior Constable Farragher made their initial observations of the scene on 11 September near Mr Kaplan's home by helicopter, where they identified a point of interest in a gully south of McLeod's Creek Road. Mr May and Senior Constable Farragher alighted from a helicopter at Mr Kaplan's property and had a discussion there with Graham Lightbody, Deputy Captain of the Drake Brigade of the RFS, who led the crew on 5 September 2019 and was the first responder to the Long Gully fire. The Deputy Captain had observed the fire west of Long Gully Road on the western side of McLeod's Creek. He and his crew reached the fire at about 3 p.m. that day. Mr Lightbody showed Mr May the approximate area where he first observed the fire. Mr May and Senior Constable Farragher commenced an investigation using the northwest boundary of the fire to provide an entry point, and then tracking fire indicators to a likely area of origin. They eventually came upon a point in the gully where they could see backing fire in every direction, which suggested this was the location where the fire originated. Mr. May identified a burnt-out tree and a stump that had burnt out internally. And I'll just have that tree displayed now, or stump, I should say. In addition to being internally burnt, Mr. May identified other features of this tree which were consistent with lightning strike, including raising of the surface of the ground from root movement, rocks that were displaced in an upward direction, and charred slabs of timber on the ground that had been sliced off the tree and resembled fence posts or 4x2s. Mr. May told Your Honour, when lightning strikes a dead tree, unless the core of the tree is moist, the tree doesn't explode. You'll get branches that have come off, which are in a number of photographs of the scene, and you'll get slabs of timber that actually resemble fence posts or 4x2s. It actually gets sliced off the tree, and around that tree stump there was indications of that sort of timber, even with natural wood colour that had been charred and removed. Mr. May placed some weight upon the fact that the slabs of timber had not been weathered and had been displaced some 18 to 20 metres from the northern side of what he identified as the subject tree. Mr. May further had regard to lightning strike data, which recorded 3 lightning strikes on 30 August 2019 within 1.6 kilometres to 1.8 kilometres from the suspect area of origin. While none of these strikes correspond with the precise area of the burnt-out tree, Mr. May was conscious of what he understood to be the limitations of lightning strike data, specifically that not all ground strikes are in fact recorded. The geographical accuracy of where lightning actually strikes can vary, particularly in hilly terrain such as the gully Mr. May examined. Having reviewed RFS documentation, lightning strike data, speaking with Mr. Lightbody, making area observations, and having conducted a detailed scene examination of the presence of fire indicators, Mr. May was prepared to conclude that the Long Gully fire originated in a gully southwest of McLeod's Creek Road, near Mr. Kaplan's property, 681B, McLeod's Creek Road, Sandy Hill, and its suspected cause was a lightning strike on 30 August 2019. Mr. May was able to eliminate other causes for the fire due to lack of evidence, including campfire, smoking, debris burning, equipment use, suspicious means, juvenile fire, rubble, power line, or other miscellaneous causes. In reaching this opinion, Mr. May took into account that the fire originated in a very remote area without much passing traffic or other people around. Lightning was reported in the area on 30 August 2019, but the fire itself was not observed by Mr. Kaplan and others until 5 September, was, in his view, consistent with an internal fire commencing in a tree struck by lightning, which probably burned for several days before the tree fell, causing fire to spread. Mr. told Your Honour there was little visible smoke in that intervening period. Senior Constable Farrick identified the same area of interest for the ignition of the fire as that of Mr. May. This was the gully south of Clouds Creek Road. Senior Constable Farrier observed large logs at the base of the gully, almost completely consumed by fire and reduced to charcoal, indicating a long, slow burn. Fire indicators suggested the fire ultimately advanced at moderate to low intensity out of the gully in a southeast direction, carried by prevailing light winds. Senior Constable Farragher was reasonably satisfied that the suspect galley was the area of origin of the Long Gully fire. Senior Constable Farragher was not, however, prepared to conclude that lightning was the cause of the Long Gully fire, although he thought this was the most likely potential cause. Senior Constable Farragher identified two large trees in the gully, which were almost completely consumed by fire. He concluded that the two trees were possible targets of lightning strike, but there was no damage or lightning scar evidence to allow him to determine the lightning strike had impacted upon either tree, as a matter of fact. Senior Constable Farragher seemed to place significance on the recorded location of the lightning strikes. He noted in his statement, I'll just have a map displayed now, that there were no lightning strikes within a 1 kilometre area of the suspected area of origin on 30 August 2019. Senior Constable Farragher was ultimately unable to give oral evidence during the hearing. It follows that proposition could not be put to Senior Constable Farragher that Mr. relied upon as to the reliability and interpretation of lightning strike data. Nonetheless, the court had the benefit of an expert report from Jeff Conway. Mr. Conway's 41 years experience in stoke fire investigation practice, bushfire behaviour, emergency management preparedness and response arrangement. Mr. Conway's previous role have included Director of Forest and Fire Operations within the Victorian Department of Environment, Land, Water and Planning, Deputy Chief Fire Officer of Forest Fire Management Victoria and Deputy Chief Officer of the Country Fire Authority of Victoria. While Mr. Conway is not a trained fire investigator, he previously held positions in fire investigators have reported to him about the outcome of the investigations, has provided policy advice to the Victorian Government, acted as a consultant to fire services on the development of operational incident management doctrine, acted as a lead and a member of incident management teams responsible for the management of major emergency incidents in Victoria and New South Wales, provide reports to previous bushfire inquiry, authored a map on fire incident management and peer-reviewed articles on emergency management. Unfortunately, restrictions arise from the COVID response and further flood emergency in North New South Wales at the time of the hearing prevented Mr. Conway from travelling to the scene himself. So his review focused upon the methodology and the conclusions expressed by each investigator based upon observations at the scene. Conway concluded that both cause and origin investigations were conducted in a way that closely aligned with fire investigation training and were representative of good practice. Not troubled by the difference of opinion between the investigators, noting their views are common as a consequence of individual determinations based on available evidence. Mr. Conway gave evidence that, in his experience, and having regard to available research, the system used to monitor and identify lightning strikes are not entirely reliable, and in fact can be anywhere from 70 to 90% reliable in identifying that a strike occurred. The accuracy of a lightning strike occurred can vary from 100 metres to 10 kilometres. He characterised lightning strike data as an incredibly useful tool which can be used in conjunction with scene identification of lightning indicators to identify lightning strike as a possible cause of fire. That is, lightning strike data is not definitive on its own. Mr. Conway agreed with Mr. May that soil disturbance, as shown in the photo taken by Mr. May, one of the indicators that give confidence in concluding that lightning is a potential cause of fire. Mr. Conway placed weight on the presence of the internally burnt stump as evidence consistent with lightning strike. His part ultimately concluded that lightning strike could be identified as the most probable cause of the Long Gully fire on the basis of the information before him. Mr. Conway was fortified in this conclusion by the remote location of the area of origin, absence of any other potential cause, and the presence of consistent fire indicators. In his report, Mr. Conway ultimately concluded that the methodologies applied by both investigators were generally adequate, and while there were additional investigation tasks that conceivably could have been undertaken to determine the cause and origin of the fire, those steps were unlikely to have changed the conclusions which were in fact made. Coming then to our submission to the cause and origin of the Valley Road fire at Drake, we say this. At the close of the inquiry, the 1st of March 2022, those in Your Honour foreshadowed formal submissions as to the cause and origin of the Valley fire. Consistently with those submissions submitted, that first, the origin of the Gully Road Drake fire was in a small bush gully southwest of the property at 681B McLeod's Creek Road, Sandy Hill, approximately 10 kilometres southwest of a small community of Drake. And secondly, the cause of the fire was a lightning strike to a tree on or about 30 August 2019. And I would like to take the opportunity now to express, on behalf of those assisting you, recognition of the immense impact on the people of the community of the Tenterfield and Coroners Valley local government areas and other communities impacted by this fire. Honour will recall frightening, brave account given by Mr. Michael Mann, Secretary of the Ewingara FS and local resident who was confronted with the devastating impacts of the Long Gully fire on October 2019, which was read to Your Honour at the conclusion of the submissions in March of this year. Similarly, several videos taken by residents affected by the Long Gully fire, which showed the ferocity of the fire on that day, were played to Your Honour in the opening included in the brief of evidence. Finally, we note, Your Honour, the closing submissions in the separate inquests, the deaths of Gwendolyn Hyde and Robert Lindsey today. After the conclusion of this inquiry, we conclude our submissions to this inquiry by sending our condolences to the families and friends of Ms. Hyde and Mr. Lindsey, who tragically lost their lives during the Long Gully Road fire at Drake. May it please Your Honour.
Thank you, Mr. Kaplan.
If it's convenient to Your Honour, I propose now to address Your Honour in relation to inquests into the deaths of Gwendolyn Hyde and Lindsey. Gwendolyn Hyde was 69 years old and Lindsey 77 years old when they tragically died on 8 October 2019 after the Long Gully Road fire overwhelmed their property in Coonbar. Long Gully Road fire had burnt, as I submitted earlier, for some weeks before making fierce progression on 8 October 2019 under extreme fire weather conditions. Fire progressed through dense pine tree plantations, scrubland, onto Coonbar, impacting isolated rural properties, including the property of Gwendolyn and Robert. Gwendolyn and Robert remained in their home on the property at the time of the fire. Their remains were discovered within the house, which had been destroyed by the fire. The chronology of events are as follows, Your Honour. The 770-acre property in which Gwendolyn and Robert lived was surrounded by pine forest plantation and rugged bushland. And you will see that from this satellite image now displayed. The house was a rustic log cabin that had no internal linings. The roof was made of corrugated iron sheeting, exposing large gaps in the eaves. The house was filled with an accumulation of furniture and other items. Gwendolyn was regarded as being physically fit and active, while Robert was reported to be less active with some mobility limitations. And I've just been passed a note. Apparently the audio is cut in and out, and subject to your honours, of course, would have been appropriate to take an amendment.
Oh, certainly.
To rectify that.
That we rectify that. So we'll take the adjournment now and resume 11:45.
Please.
Silence, please. All stand. This coroner's court resumes.
Your Honour, thank you for the time. I'll recommence my closing address in relation to the inquest into the deaths of Gwendolyn and Robert. At 5:16 p.m. on 8 October 2019, spot fires ignited ahead of the Long Gully Road fire front in the direction of Coonbar and in close proximity to Gwendolyn and Robert's property. Your Honour will see that shortly by reference to this line scan. At 5:54 p.m, the Long Gully Road fire reached the property, and by 6:35 p.m, the fire had engulfed the property, including their home. Gwendolyn's landline phone was active and was used numerous times over the course of the day between 10:44 a.m. and 5:36 p.m. to contact friends and associates. Some of those calls went unanswered. Gwendolyn telephoned a friend, Barry Usher, at 11:03 a.m. and said to Barry, "Bloody fires again." According to Barry, Gwendolyn sounded concerned but not panicked. At 3:21 p.m, Gwendolyn telephoned another friend and fellow prayer group member, Josie McGovern. According to Josie, Gwendolyn spoke of her plans to come to casino the following day, but at no stage in that telephone conversation had she mentioned the fires in the area. At 4:48 p.m, Vance Tablin, a concerned local friend, telephoned Gwendolyn about the encroaching fire after noticing black smoke with white cumulus clouds appearing to be above her property. According to Vance, Gwendolyn did not seem concerned about the fires.
I'm sorry, Mr. Castleton, but there is some trouble with the monitor hearing. I might have to just take a short break so we resolve this problem. Apologies to all.
Silence, please. All stand. This coroner's court is temporarily adjourned. Silence, please. All stand. This coroner's court resumes.
Thank you, Your Honour. Second time lucky, I hope.
Apologies to everyone. Hopefully we'll be right now. Thank you, Mr. Castleton.
Returning to the 8th of October 2019, at 4:52 p.m, Gwendolyn received a call from Stuart Watts, Deputy Incident Controller at the Glen Innes Fire Control Centre, who had serious concerns for their safety. Stuart informed Gwendolyn about the status of the fire, advising that it had jumped the Clarence River. From around 5 p.m, Gwendolyn had made several phone calls to local friends in the area. The evidence from these friends is that Gwendolyn was very worried as the fire appeared to be approaching her house and had begun to spot in her orchard. At 5:21 p.m, Gwendolyn called the Ulmarra Fire Control Centre and spoke with the community safety officer, informing the officer that the fire was in her orchard and was leaping across the roof. Immediate attempts were made by the RFS to arrange a fire crew and provide assistance as soon as was possible. However, no crews were available at that stage, and it was deemed likely too late to attend the property given the remote location. Gwendolyn made a final call to her friend Carl Waters at 5:36 p.m. Carl provided evidence in his statement of the conversation he had with Gwendolyn, stating as follows. At 5:36 p.m. the same day, I received a telephone call from Gwen. I spoke with Gwen. She asked me for help. Something like, "Can you help?" I said, "What is wrong?" She said, "Something about the fire. All the entries were blocked by fires. No one could get in." I said, "Have you contacted the fireys?" She said, "They're not coming." I said, "What are the conditions?" She said, "Everything outside is on fire. The house had just caught on fire." I said, "Just somewhere safe, that's all you can do." At approximately 5:47 p.m, an RFS contracted helicopter pilot, Mr. Ashley Hogan, flew over Gwendolyn and Robert's property. Mr. Hogan noticed a woman come off the veranda of the house and began to wave at the helicopter and another person standing on the deck watching. He observed trees, scrub and a shed to the north and west of the property on fire. Mr. Hogan told Your Honour that as he flew over Gwendolyn and Robert's property, he recalls thinking it was going to be difficult to defend the property because of the amount of timber, sheds and equipment around the property and a lack of cleared space also around the property. After dropping water on the fire from his helicopter, Mr. Hogan made an urgent radio call informing the RFS of the situation. Mr. Hogan departed the area to locate a water source needed to refill the bucket on his helicopter, returning approximately 10 minutes later at about 5:57 p.m. But by this time, the fire had progressed and he was unable to safely approach the property. Mr. Hogan states that the house was no longer visible due to smoke. It is likely that during this short window of time, the fire had engulfed the property and Gwendolyn and Robert died. 2 RFS crews were notified of the fire heading towards the property and immediately headed to the residence, arriving at about 6:30 p.m. Access to the property proved difficult due to fallen trees and power lines. On arrival, the RFS crews observed that the house had been completely destroyed by the fire and was still smouldering. The corrugated roof had collapsed to the ground. Despite the efforts of the RFS crews to locate any person on the property, Gwendolyn and Robert could not be located and were reported as missing. The following day, the 9th of October 2019, New South Wales Police attended the scene and searched the property, but did not locate Gwendolyn or Robert. Later that day, the New South Wales Police Forensic Services Group, New South Wales Fire and Rescue, the SES and the New South Wales RFS teams conducted a complete forensic search at the property. On 10 October 2019, investigators conducted a forensic search and located remains in the southeastern corner of the house underneath the corrugated roof. On 16 and 17 October 2019, a forensic analysis was conducted with the remains positively confirmed on the balance of probabilities to be those of Gwendolyn Hyde and Robert Lindsey. The remains were found together in close proximity within the house, demonstrating that Gwendolyn and Robert had attempted to retreat and seek refuge from the fire together. Coming, if I may, to our final submissions, Your Honour. Your Honour has received into evidence two discrete briefs of evidence for Gwendolyn Hyde and Robert Lindsey, each comprising over 300 pages. The briefs of evidence include statements from members of Gwendolyn and Robert's family, statements from members of the New South Wales Police Force, New South Wales Forestry Corporation, Microflight Helicopter Services, Rural Fire Service, as well as civilian witness statements. It also includes a structural fire examination report from New South Wales Police and a forensic anthropological report from the Department of Forensic Medicine. Pursuant to Section 81 of the Coroners Act, the coroner holding an inquest concerning the death of a person is required to make findings as to the identity of the person who died, when and where they died, and what was the cause and the manner of that person's death. In addition, the coroner may make recommendations considered necessary or desirable in relation to matters which have the capacity to improve public health and safety in the future, arising out of the death in question. In these inquests, Gwendolyn and Robert's identities are known, as is the date and place of their deaths. For this reason, the inquest into Gwendolyn and Robert's deaths focused on the manner and cause of their deaths. In oral evidence, Detective Senior Constable Steve Hoffman, officer in charge of the Coronial investigation into the deaths of Gwendolyn and Robert, described the conditions around Coombar on the afternoon of 8 October 2019 as extreme. He stated Gwendolyn and Robert's property was situated at the end of Dead Man Creek Road, a dead-end road, meaning that there was only one road in and out of their property. Detective Senior Constable Hoffman told Your Honour that mobile reception at the property was very limited to essentially zero mobile reception, with reception predominantly non-existent at the dwelling. Gwendolyn and Robert did, however, have a fixed landline phone and internet connection. Detective Senior Constable Hoffman gave evidence about the state of their property from a fire safety perspective. In his opinion, the property was not well prepared and was at high risk of being impacted by bushfire. Although the area around their property was largely cleared of large trees, the property itself was cluttered with items in close proximity to the house. Displayed now, Your Honour, is an aerial image of the property. Your Honour will see that the house is just below the centre and to the left in that image. According to Detective Senior Constable Hoffman, Gwendolyn was regarded by her friends and family as bush smart. Evidence before the court was that Gwendolyn had previous interactions with the RFS at New South Wales Forestry, reporting fire activities in the area. Although Gwendolyn and Robert did not have a formalised or documented bushfire plan, her family indicated that Gwendolyn had an informal plan that in the event of bushfire she would drive to the swamp to the northwest of the property. The evidence demonstrates that Gwendolyn had a long-standing view that in the event of a fire she would be very unlikely to leave the property, Robert or the animals. Coming, if I may, Your Honour, to manner and cause. As outlined previously, Detective Senior Constable Hoffman provided oral evidence during the inquest that the dwelling on Gwendolyn and Robert's property was completely destroyed by the Long Gully Road fire on 8 October 2019. The forensic examination conducted on 10 October 2019 located Gwendolyn and Robert's remains under the corrugated roof to the south-east corner of the dwelling. Separate external examinations were conducted following Gwendolyn and Robert's deaths, which concluded that the cause of the deaths was the effects of fire. It is submitted that this should be recorded as the cause of death for both Gwendolyn and Robert, as it captures that Gwendolyn and Robert's cause of the death was as a result of the Long Gully Road fire engulfing their home. Finally, Your Honour, those assisting Your Honour wish to express publicly our condolences to Lisa, Michael and Anthony for the tragic loss of Robert, their beloved father, and to Jenny, Stephen and Anthony for the tragic loss of Gwen, their beloved mother. May it please Your Honour.
Thank you, Mr. Castleton. And I too would like to express my condolences to the families of Gwendolyn and Robert.
May it please the Court. Your Honour, could I move now, please, to address Your Honour in relation to Your Honour's inquiry into the fire at Werryberry?
Thank you.
The Werryberry fire burned for 28 days before it merged with the Badger Forest fire. The Werryberry fire burnt predominantly within the Bega Valley local government area, encompassed within the lands of the Yuin people. During the inquiry, Your Honour heard how that the fire ultimately burnt over 27,789 hectares. The fire burned largely in dense bushland within the Wadbilliga National Park in an area known as Yankees Gap. And I'll just have displayed a satellite image that generally depicts the area we're concerned with. The mountain of Werryberry is set between the townships of Bemboka and Steeple Flat. It is approximately 33 kilometres northwest of Bega, 12 kilometres north of Bemboka and 25 kilometres southeast of Cooma. The fire damaged a total of 148 structures, including 24 residences. There was no loss of life from this fire. Cause and origin investigations conducted by the New South Wales Rural Fire Service and, of course, New South Wales Police indicate that the cause of the fire was by lightning strike on the 29th of December 2019, and the origin was the area where a plume of smoke was observed by the RFS on that date. This fire, Your Honour, was one of very many fires across the state of New South Wales in the 2019-2020 bushfire season. As I have said previously, not all fires were reported to the coroner. Not all fires reported to the coroner proceeded to a coronial inquiry into cause and origin. As I have said previously, not all fires that proceeded to a coronial inquiry into the cause and origin will continue to further consideration via a general inquiry as part of Your Honour's Stage 2 hearings. It is submitted that it is not necessary for the Werryberry fire to proceed to further investigation via a general inquiry. Coming, if I may, to the chronology of events. The fire was first observed by the RFS from a helicopter on 29 December 2019. At about 4:57 p.m. on this day, an RFS aerial patrol was flying in vicinity of Werryberry Mountain when the aerial crew noticed smoke coming from the thick scrub. We have a photograph taken at that time, Your Honour, which Your Honour sees now. The RFS crew identified a small fire with a large tree burning within the fire. The next day, 30 December 2019, the fire spread 14 to 18 kilometres to the southeast Your Honour sees that progression now on the screen. This was considered extreme and abnormal fire behaviour. Over the following week, the fire continued to spread at a steady rate, generally towards the northeast and northwest. Over the following week, the fire continued to spread at a steady rate, generally towards the northeast and northwest. By 13 January 2020, the fire spread approximately 8 to 9 kilometres to the northwest, again considered extreme and abnormal fire behaviour. At this point, the fire had coalesced or merged with part of the Badger Forest fire. And Your Honour will see that displayed on this particular fire progression map. The footprint of the Werryberry fire only marginally increased in size between 13 and 25 January 2020. As at 25 January of 2020, the fire was recorded as amalgamated because the northern front of the fire burned onto the southern aspect of the Badger Forest fire. Your Honour has received into evidence a volume of evidence which includes statements from members of the New South Wales Police Force and civilian witnesses. It also includes RFS documents, RFS officer statements and lightning strike data mapping. Your Honour also received into evidence a general brief relating more broadly to the southern region of New South Wales. Detective Senior Constable Bradley, Mr Moon, Mr Howell, Mr Rorty and Mr Inskip each gave oral evidence on the 13th of September last year. Pursuant to Section 81 of the Coroners Act, the coroner holding an inquiry concerning a fire is required to make findings as to the date and place of the fire and the circumstances of that fire. In addition, the coroner may make recommendations considered necessary or desirable in relation to matters which have the capacity to improve public health and safety in the future arising out of that fire. In this inquiry, the focus was on identifying where and when the Werryberry fire originated and the circumstances of same, including the cause. Coming, if I may, to key conclusions. Detective Senior Constable Glenn Bradley told the court that police had obtained satellite maps in regard to lightning strike data in the area of the plume of smoke observed by the RFS aerial crew on 29 December 2019. Your Honour will see those satellite images now on screen. Notably, there was significant lightning activity in the area on 29 December 2019. The data displayed that lightning strikes were active until 4 p.m. on 29 December 2019 and then again between 4 p.m. on 29 December and 4 p.m. on 30 December 2019. The strikes are shown relative, as Your Honour sees, to the area of the fire shown in the first fire progression map in the images on the left and the location of the first identified plume of smoke in the image on the right. RFS member Jake Rorty gave evidence that while conducting duties looking for spot fires as a result of a lightning band on the 29th of December 2019, the original plume of smoke was first spotted. The team took photographs of the plume of smoke which was observed coming from a single tree. Your Honour will see just now 2 photographs of that plume. And the burning tree. RFS member John Inskip gave evidence to Your Honour that he became aware of the fire on the 29th of December. On 30 December, fire crews met at Bemboka Fire Station but were not immediately able to access the fire due to inaccessible terrain. It became accessible later on the 30th of December when the fire arrived at Yankees Gap. Fire efforts were commenced at about that time. Detective Senior Constable Gregory Moon provided evidence that, in his opinion, based on lightning strike data, the Werryberry fire started due to a lightning strike that was recorded in the area at about 1:29 p.m. on the 29th of December, which was within 200 metres of the area of the plume of smoke photographed by Jake Rorty on the 29th of December. Detective Senior Sergeant Moon stated that lightning strike data is normally accurate between 2 to 250 metres. Other causes of the fire were ruled out by the police investigation, given the terrain and the lack of roads, tracks or fire trails in the relevant area. New South Wales RFS fire investigator Darren Howell gave evidence that because of the remote location of the fire, investigators eliminated human intervention as the cause of the fire. Mr. Howell referred to lightning strike data dated between 27 and 29 December 2019. His investigation indicated that the cause of the fire was natural, caused by a lightning strike to a tree in the vicinity of the plume of smoke observed on the 29th of December, but could not identify a point of origin of the fire. Coming to our submissions on cause and origin of the fire. Your Honour, it is submitted that the area of origin of the fire was in the general area of where the plume of smoke was first detected on the 29th of December 2019. The cause of the fire was a lightning strike between the 27th and the 29th of December 2019. In conclusion, Your Honour, those assisting, Your Honour, express our gratitude to the officer in charge of the investigation for his investigation and assistance with the coronial inquiry into the Werryberry fire. May it please Your Honour.
Thank you, Mr. Castleton.
Turning, if I may, Your Honour, to our closing addresses in relation to the Adaminity complex fire. The Adaminity complex fire occurred in the Snowy Monero local government area on the lands of the Ngarigo people. The fire burned from the 31st of December 2019 to 16 February 2020 for approximately 48 days and damaged an area of 98,484 hectares comprising of national park and pastoral land. There were 30 structures damaged and 4 were destroyed, 2 of which were residences. The fire impacted numerous townships including Adaminity, Mount Morgan, Mount Selwyn, Nungar and Shannon's Flat. I'll just have displayed a satellite image of the relevant area. Your Honour, the Adaminity township is on the eastern side of the Snowy Mountain Plateau and on the edge of the Kosciuszko National Park. It is approximately 50 kilometres northwest of Cooma. Most of this area is rugged bushland with sporadic farming country and private properties on either side of the Snowy Mountains Highway. The Adaminity complex fire was a culmination of multiple ignitions, all caused by lightning, which resulted in the Bugtown fire, the Coolamon complex fire, and the Doubtful Gap fire. The Duns Road fire eventually overran most of these fires, known as the Adaminity complex fire, in early January of 2020. Although encompassing these different fires, the Adaminity complex fire was managed by the Cooma Incident Management Team. This fire was one of very many fires across the state of New South Wales in the 2019-2020 bushfire season. As I have said today, not all fires were reported to Your Honour. Not all fires reported to Your Honour proceeded to a coronial inquiry into cause and origin. And as Your Honour has heard, not all fires that proceeded to a coronial inquiry into the cause and origin will continue to be further considered via a general inquiry as part of Your Honour's Stage 2 proceedings. It is submitted that it is not necessary for the Adaminity complex fire to proceed to further investigation via a general inquiry. If I can come now, please, to the chronology of events, dealing firstly with the Bugtown fire. In the afternoon of 31 December 2019, lightning likely caused the Bugtown fire, which was first observed by Warren Menzies. He was a local resident and called 000 at 2:25 p.m. on that day after witnessing about 4 lightning strikes towards Bugtown Road and 4 strikes in the vicinity of Mars Hill. Mr Menzies lived at a property located on Anglers Reach Road, Anglers Reach, from which he had a substantial view to the north and onto Bugtown. Displayed now, Your Honour, is a photograph that Mr Menzies took showing a plume of smoke towards the north, and this photograph was taken on the afternoon of the 31st of December 2019. Coming to the Coolomon complex fire, in the afternoon of 31 December 2019, the Rural Fire Service requested and obtained the assistance of a Firebird 100 helicopter in order to observe, document and map fires commenced by lightning in the area. Firebird 100 undertook surveillance in the area north-northwest of Adaminity, known as a lightning run, at which point a further ignition was identified. And Your Honour will see on the screen shortly thermal images of some of the hotspots identified by Firebird 100 in the afternoon on the 31st of December 2019, identified in their lightning run. This ignition was referred to, as I've said previously, as the Coolomon complex fire and was north of the original Bugtown fire. There was also a further ignition on 31 December 2019 to the west of this northern cluster, which in those first few days was referred to as the Nungar Ridge fires before merging with the Coolomon complex fire. Coming next to the Doubtful Gap fire, again on the 31st of December, there was a further ignition. This occurred in the area of the Doubtful Gap fire trail, being a very remote and difficult area to access. Due to the location and close proximity to the Duns Road fire, there was no ground or aerial reconnaissance undertaken. Investigating police analysed the lightning strike data for this day and identified the particular lightning recorded that afternoon in the vicinity of the Doubtful Gap fire trail. And Your Honour will see that depicted on this particular map on screen. Due to the difficult terrain and the location of the Doubtful Gap fire, together with the proximity of the Duns Road fire, this fire was not the focus, understandably, of RFS resources for a number of days following ignition. Finally, can I come to the Adaminity complex fire? The brief of evidence demonstrates that on 1 January 2020, the Bugtown fire and Coolomon complex ignitions merged and were all referred to and renamed the Adaminity complex fire. The fires continued to burn and on the 4th of January 2020 progressed significantly. On the 4th of January, between 3 and 4 p.m, the Doubtful Gap fire merged with the Duns Road fire. The remaining Adaminity complex fires ran between 18 and 24 kilometres to the southeast that day, which was considered a significant run and extreme fire behaviour. On 11 January 2020, the Adaminity complex fires amalgamated with the Doubtful Gap fire. The New South Wales police officer in charge, Detective Senior Constable Ben Waldron, explained in his statement that from this point onwards, all these fires were managed as the Adaminity complex fire. The fire continued to spread in numerous directions over the following days and the remainder of January. By 16 February 2020, the fire was mapped as not spreading and was authorised as out. And Your Honour will see on the screen shortly the final fire progression map for the Adaminity complex fires. The RFS assigned fire investigator Mike Futuro to investigate the cause and origin of Bugtown fire. Mr Futuro examined the area of the Bugtown fire on the 21st of January 2020 and determined a particular tree was the subject of lightning and the origin of the fire. Only one ignition point was examined at that time. New South Wales Police assigned Crime Scene Officer Mark Hollins from the Forensic Evidence and Technical Services Command to undertake a further examination of the cause and origin of the various fires that made up the Adaminity complex fire. On 19 February 2020, the FETS team reviewed the likely multiple ignition points for these fires and completed aerial reconnaissance of the fire grounds. On the 20th and 21st of February 2020, the FETS team then completed a ground-based examination. A number of sites, referred to as hotspots, were visited on the ground, together with an examination of the related lightning strike data for those particular areas. The damage caused by the fire was surveyed by New South Wales Police. There were 30 structures damaged and 4 were destroyed, 2 of which, as I have said previously, were residences. Significant damage was caused to the properties on the Selwyn ski fields in Kyndra. These properties were destroyed by the Duns Road fire but were recorded as having occurred under the banner of the Adaminity complex fire. One of the residences that was destroyed was a rural property on 2268 Yayak Road, Adaminity. The second property destroyed was located at 2475 Yayak Road. Further, 390 livestock died and 3,000 kilometres of fencing was destroyed. Coming, if I may, to our closing submissions. Your Honour has received into evidence a volume of evidence which includes statements from members of the New South Wales Police Force, RFS, National Parks and Wildlife Service, as well as civilian witness statements. Of course, Your Honour has before you RFS operational documents and weather data. Your Honour also received into evidence a further volume of evidence comprising photographs and videos for the far southern region of fires, which included 3 photographs relating to the Adaminity fire, as well as a general brief relating more broadly to the southern region of New South Wales. Detective Senior Constable Waldron, Mr Futuro, Mr Hollins and Mr Warren Menzies each gave oral evidence on the 22nd of September last year. As I have said previously, pursuant to Section 81 of the Coroners Act, the coroner holding an inquiry concerning a fire is required to make findings as to the date and place of the fire and the circumstances of that particular fire. In addition, the coroner may make recommendations considered necessary or desirable in relation to any matter connected with the fire inquiry. In this particular inquiry, as Your Honour knows, the central focus was on identifying where and when the Adaminity complex fire originated and the circumstances of same, including the cause. Coming to the expert evidence and key conclusions. Detective Senior Constable Waldron gave evidence in relation to the weather that was experienced at the time of these fires. In his evidence, he noted there was significant lightning recorded between 31 December and the 1st of January 2020. In particular, on the 31st of December 2019, lightning was registered at 1:58 p.m, which Detective Senior Constable Waldron said resulted in the Bugtown ignition. Further, on the 4th of January of 2020, the wind speed, temperature and relative humidity were noteworthy. He advised that anything under 20% humidity is dangerously dry. In terms of the RFS response, Detective Senior Constable Waldron noted that the Adaminity Fire Brigade was sent to the Bugtown ignition, being the only fire they were aware of at that time. After speaking with the Deputy Captain, because of the storms and weather at the time as well as the rugged terrain, the fire was very difficult to control. Mr Fraturo gave evidence in relation to his investigation of the cause and origin of the Bugtown fire and his ground-based inspection that took place, as I said previously, on the 21st of January 2020. Mr Fraturo described his approach into the general area of origin. He tracked the fire from Tatangara Road, about 3 kilometres to the east, to Gravel's Hut, and couldn't proceed any further because of the boggy terrain. So he followed the Gravel's Hut trail around to the heel of the fire and then zigzagged his way up, tracking backing indicators up the hill from Gravel's Hut trail. Mr Fraturo gave evidence that the lightning strike was to the southwest of the Gravel's Hut trail and struck a particular green tree. He described the tree to be about 300 metres west of the Gravel's Hut trail. Having regard to the GPS coordinates in relation to a precise location, Mr Fraturo deferred to the report prepared by Mr Hollins. Mr Fraturo described the classic indicators of a green tree being struck by lightning. Mr Fraturo, Your Honour, took several photographs of the tree, which Your Honour sees on screen now. Along the top of the trunk, there was a split that ran in the bark from the top to the base. At the base, he said you could see there was a billet of wood that had been completely blown out at the base, and there were other billets lying around. There were also the blackened roots in the tree. Mr Fraturo further described the fire indicators that led him to this specific point of origin. He came up from the backing side of the fire and there was staining and sooting. And Your Honour will see that next on the screen. There was a bit of leaf freeze and grass fall indicators until he got into this area, and then it turned into running fire indicators, which were staining and sooting and grass tufts cupping on the grass. With regards to lightning strike data, Mr Fraturo confirmed that a lightning strike closest to the described point of origin occurred very early in the morning of 29 December 2019 and was certain that lightning strike was the one that ignited the tree. When asked how many metres from the recorded lightning strike on 29 December 2019 to the particular tree identified in his report, Mr Fraturo opined that it would have been within 200 to 300 metres. Finally, Mr Fraturo was questioned with regards to other possible causes of ignition. He concluded that the area was far too remote for juveniles, with the last people that were recorded there in the Gravel's Hut Trail Visitors Book was 16 December 2019. He described that it is not particularly trafficable track and it's in a remote area. Mr. Futuro also was of the opinion that the Duns Road fire, which was at Tumbarumba, was too far away to have ignited this fire. Mr. Hollins also gave evidence in relation to his investigation into the cause and origin of the Adaminity complex fire. Mr. Hollins confirmed in his evidence that the Adaminity complex fire was the amalgamation of a number of fires, including the Coolamon complex fire, the Nungar Ridge fire, Bugtown fire, Doubtful Gap fire, Yayak Road fire, Illawong Road fire, Snowy Mountains Highway fire, Mount Morgan fire and Druitt Street fire. On 19 February 2020, Mr. Hollins performed an aerial inspection of the likely area of origin of the multiple ignition points and noted that scene examinations were performed in the following days. As a result of the aerial inspection, Mr. Hollins determined a number of hotspots having regard to the Firebird 100 images that had been previously supplied to him, which were recorded on the afternoon of 31 December 2019. In relation to the lightning strike data provided by the Global Positioning and Tracking System, known as GPATS, Mr. Hollins gave evidence that he believes the location accuracy for their data is approximately 250 metres, depending on the geographical location where the sensors are located. It reports at up to 98% of detection efficiency. Mr. Hollins explained his methodology to try and identify an area of origin for a particular ignition. He overlaid the Firebird 100 imagery together with the lightning strike data obtained by GPATS. He advised that the data pack from the lightning strike on the day in question, 31 December, was extraordinarily large, so they were broken down into geographical areas and timeframes. He overlaid that with the hotspot and focused on that information as well as some other weather data, icon information from the RFS, police holdings, fire progression maps and imagery available. An example of this methodology, Your Honour, is shown on the screen now. It indicates by way of a blue marker the identified hotspot, green markers the location of lightning strikes, and plotted in purple 3 trees that displayed signs of being struck by lightning. On screen now, Your Honour, is a photograph attached to Mr. Holdings' report of one of the affected, Mr. Holland's report of one of the affected trees near hotspot number 5. As a result of that analysis, Mr. Hollins focused on 7 hotspot areas and concluded that all the hotspots and areas he examined had lightning data and ground or aerial examinations which supported lightning strikes as the cause. Mr. Hollins added that in his report he excluded a number of other causes of fire, such as natural, deliberate and accidental, reckless or unintentional causes. Coming to our submissions on cause and origin of the Adaminity complex fire, it is submitted that Your Honour would find that the cause and origin of the Adaminity complex fire was a culmination of multiple ignitions that occurred in the general area at the eastern spread of the Duns Road fire. The multiple ignitions were all caused by lightning strikes in late December 2019. Finally, Your Honour, those assisting, Your Honour, would like to publicly express our gratitude to Detective Senior Constable Wardren, Mr. Futuro and Mr. Hollins for their assistance with the Coronial inquiry into the Adaminity complex fire.
Thank you, Mr. Castleton.
Your Honour, I do know the time, but there's one final inquiry which I'd like to address Your Honour on. It relates to the border of Rocktown fire. I'm rather hopeful that I'll be concluded before the luncheon adjournment. Your Honour, the border, Rockton fire, originated in Victoria near the small town of Wingan River in the northeast of Victoria between the Cairn River and Malakuta following intense thunderstorm activity. This Victorian fire was named the Snowy 9 Banana Track Fire. The fire crossed over the New South Wales border and burned into two different local government areas, each on the lands of the Yuin people, over two different dates. Those fires were initially managed separately as the Border Fire and the Rockton Fire, but they eventually merged. This fire was one of very many fires across the state of New South Wales in the 2019-2020 bushfire season. As I've said more than once today, not all fires were reported to the coroner. Not all fires reported to the coroner proceeded to a coronial inquiry into cause and origin, and not all fires that proceeded to a coronial inquiry into the cause and origin will continue to further consideration via a general inquiry as part of Stage 2 of Your Honour's proceedings. It is submitted that it is not necessary for the Border Rockton fire to proceed to further investigation via a general inquiry. Coming to the chronology of events. On the 29th of December 2019, a fire was detected by air by Victorian authorities near the small town of Wingan River in the northeast of Victoria between Cairn River and Malakuta. At 3:22pm, this photograph on screen now, Your Honour, was taken of fire burning around the point of origin. About 2 minutes later, it was captured spotting towards the northwest. The detection of this fire followed some intense thunderstorm activity in the region around midday on the 28th of December. This Victorian fire was named the Snowy 9 Banana Track Fire. The ignition of this fire occurred at a time when significant portions of East Gippsland and the northeast of Victoria were already burning as a result of existing fires. On 30 December 2019 at about 1:50pm and on 31 December 2019 at about midday, the Rural Fire Services New South Wales were provided with an update on the Snowy 9 Banana Track Fire. On 31 December 2019, by 3pm, the Snowy 9 Banana Track Fire had burnt nearly 85,000 hectares in Victoria. At that time, the New South Wales RFS were advised that the fire was 2 kilometres south of the border. The Snowy 9 Banana Track Fire crossed over into New South Wales, as I said earlier, at two separate locations and on different dates. On the 31st of December 2019, between 3 and 3:30pm, the Snowy 9 Banana Track Fire crossed into the southeast region of New South Wales near Timbilika and was initially named the Border Fire. Your Honour sees a general depiction of the fire's progression on that day. This particular fire burned in the Bega Valley local government area and continued to burn in a northerly direction. On 5 January 2020, the Snowy 9 Banana Track Fire crossed again into New South Wales near the small township of Rockton and was initially named the Rockton Fire. This fire burned in the Snowy Monero local government area. On the 5th of January, the Border and Rockton fires merged. When the fires merged, the Border Fire remained under the management of the Bega Valley Incident Control Centre under Incident Controller Angus Barnes. The Rockton fire continued to be managed by the Snowy Monero Incident Control under Incident Controller Jim Darrant. The speed and extent of the progression of the fires up to 6 January 2020 is shown on these maps on screen now. In 9 days, the fires had spread from a single remote point in Victoria well into New South Wales. On the 4th of March 2020, the border fire was declared out by New South Wales RFS. The border fire burned for 67 days and damaged an area of approximately 500,000 hectares. There were 111 residences, 8 facilities and 234 outbuildings destroyed. Further, 25 residences, 12 facilities and 49 outbuildings sustained damage, totalling 439 affected properties as a result of the border fire. The Rockton fire burned until 6 March 2020 for a period of 61 days. The Rockton fire damaged an area of approximately 26,300 hectares and destroyed 4 homes and 10 outbuildings. Further, it damaged 1 home and 5 outbuildings, totalling 20 affected properties as a result of the Rockton fire. On 27 March 2020, Leslie John Veering, Senior Investigator and State Fire Investigation Coordinator of the Victorian Department of Environment, Land, Water and Planning, reviewed the area of origin of the Snowy 9 banana track fire. Mr. Veering was unable to find any sign of human activity that could have caused the fire. After attending the area of origin of the Snowy 9 banana track fire, Mr. Veering reviewed records from the Weather Zone Total Lightning Detection Network, Lightning Tracker, which showed several ground strikes in the Wingan River area which were not picked up by the Global Positioning Tracking System, or GPATS. Your Honour, we'll see that displayed on screen now. In particular, Your Honour, 1 lightning strike in the area of origin was recorded at 12:54 p.m. on the 28th of December 2019. The location of this strike was recorded about 25 kilometres east-southwest of Cairn River, East Gippsland in Victoria. After studying the lightning records and not being able to find any other cause, in Mr. Veering's opinion, the Snowy 9 banana track fire was caused by lightning. Remarkably, there were no fatalities or significant injuries sustained as a result of the border or Rockton fires. Your Honour has received into evidence a volume of material which includes a statement from Mr. Veering, statements from members of the New South Wales Police Force and operational documents of the New South Wales RFS. Your Honour has also received into evidence a further volume of material comprising photographs and videos for the far southern region of fires, which included photographs relating to the border Rockton fire, as well, of course, as the general brief relating to the southern region of New South Wales. The officer in charge, Detective Senior Constable Glenn Bradley, and Senior Investigator and State Fire Investigation Coordinator of the Victorian Department of Environment, Land, Water and Planning, Mr. Veering, each gave evidence on the 23rd of September last year. As I have said previously, pursuant to Section 81 of the Coroners Act, the coroner holding an inquiry concerning a fire is required to make findings as to the date and place of the fire and the circumstances of the fire. In addition, the coroner may make recommendations considered necessary or desirable in relation to any matter connected with a fire inquiry. Coming to the expert evidence and key conclusions. As noted, On the 27th of March 2020, Mr Veering reviewed the area of origin of the Snowy 9 banana track fire to determine cause and origin. Mr Veering concluded that the most likely cause of the fire was a lightning strike on or about the 28th of December 2019. He opined that the fire burnt for a period of approximately 26 hours before it was detected. Mr Veering gave oral evidence at the inquiry that there was very little strategy around suppression of the fire, given the enormity of the fires that were in the landscape at the time and scarce resources at hand. The aim was to minimise damage, ensuring the safety of people by way of evacuation. Mr Veering did not identify any matter raising systemic issues which would warrant any recommendations. Detective Senior Constable Glenn Bradley, attached to the State Crime Command Fraud Unit within the New South Wales Police Force, also gave oral evidence at the inquiry. Detective Bradley was questioned in relation to conventions when it came to the naming of bushfires or wildfires. Detective Bradley gave evidence that if a fire ignites within New South Wales, it is given a name with a locality around that ignition point. Should a fire cross a local government area boundary in New South Wales, it is given a new name and managed by a different New South Wales RFS fire control district. When asked if there were any difficulties in having two different names of essentially the one fire, Detective Bradley noted that it can present difficulties when totalling figures. Detective Bradley confirmed that when the Border and Rockton fires merged, they were still managed separately by the Bega Valley Incident Control and the Snowy Monero Incident Control. Detective Bradley noted that when the fires crossed into New South Wales, the strategy was one of protection of life and property, including emergency warnings and evacuation. Detective Bradley further confirmed that there were fortunately no fatalities or significant injuries sustained as a result of the Border or Rockton fires. Detective Bradley was of the opinion that no recommendations were warranted. Coming to our submissions on cause and origin of the fire. The general area of origin of the fire was a location proximate to the banana track in Wingan River, between Cairn River and Malakuta in the northeast of Victoria. The cause of the fire was a lightning strike at approximately 12:54 p.m. on 28 December 2019. At this time, the fire was, as I have previously submitted, referred to as the Snowy 9 banana track fire. The fire then crossed into New South Wales at a time between 3 and 3:30 p.m. on the 31st of December 2019 near the township of Timbilica, at which point it was named the Border Fire. Then, on the 5th of January 2020, the fire crossed again into New South Wales in the Snowy Monero local government area, where it became known as the Rockton Fire. It is submitted that Your Honour would find this as the cause and origin of the fire. Finally, Your Honour, on behalf of those assisting, Your Honour, can I express our gratitude to Mr Veering for his participation in the Coronial inquiry into the Border and Rockton fires, as well as, of course, Detective Bradley for his investigation and assistance. Your Honour, that concludes my oral address in relation to the Border Rockton fire. Your Honour, I'm instructed that that concludes this week's hearings. Subject to any matter that Your Honour wishes to raise, of course, the next scheduled hearing day is Monday, the 12th of September 2020, where Your Honour will receive closing addresses in relation to the Busby Flat fire, the Rumba Complex fire, Ruin Castle fire, and the Little L Complex fire.
Thank you, Mr Castleton. Unless anyone wishes to raise anything We'll adjourn today and resume 10 a.m. on Monday, the 12th of September.
May it please the court.
Thank you.